Hi, and welcome to VIBEZ Daily. This is a daily devotional curated by VIBEZ Church to help you practice the way of Jesus and be all that God has called you to be. You have joined us for our year-long series titled Devoted. Acts 2:42 tells us that the followers of Jesus were devoted to the apostles' teaching, to fellowship, to breaking of bread, and to prayer. This podcast was created to provide context and commentary for what you read each day. Just before our friends begin discussing today's reading, we want to invite you not only for fellowship, but for prayer as well. We have created the Vibe Daily Chat group to offer you fellowship and a community where you can state your observations, ask questions about the reading or the podcast. You can join us by downloading the VIBEZ Church app in your favorite app store. Click Join the Conversation and join us today. And finally, we hope that you can join us for prayer. Prayer happens Monday through Friday, and more information on that can be found on the VIBEZ Church app under prayer. Now, let's begin our conversation on today's reading.
Yo, welcome to the VIBEZ Daily podcast. We're so excited to have you back with us again as we continue through our year-long series we have titled Devoted. We're going through the entire Bible from cover to cover, from Genesis, eventually through Revelation, but find ourselves here today in Chronicles chapter 27. It is day 124, and I am excited to be back with my wife, Victoria. So excited to have her with us as we bring Chronicles to a close today. Left off kind of with some structure that David was leaving for Solomon and the people of Israel first, kind of in some materials, but then also some structure for the Levites who would serve in the temple. Kind of bring that to a close here in chapter 27 as he has some assignments for some individuals who are not from the tribe of Levi. Some additional leaders he has. And then we will have a couple chapters here of just kind of some final instructions. But what jumped out to you here in chapter 27 as David gives some additional instructions to leaders outside of the tribe of Levi?
It seems like he went from or at least the way that this author structured this book, with these last few chapters, it was from the establishment of God's temple first. That was priority there. And then here we go to the military now divisions, and then later on in this chapter and so far we go to civilians, right? Who's leading the different tribes. And so I think it was interesting when we came across this that we see his leaders, there's leaders of his military, but like you mentioned yesterday, it was in the order of who served what month. And I think that was one of the things that stuck out to me again, how they had this shifts that they would take, right? This first division of the first month in verse 2 had someone, and in the second month would be someone else. They would take roles, so it was kind of they were giving each other breaks. Now I'm sure that when they went out to battle, they probably all went, but it did seem like you said, that 12-month structure that they had that we saw with the Levites and the priests and stuff is also something that's carried over into military. And then when we see in Solomon's reign too, it's kind of even in preparation for the food for his household, it was also a monthly thing, who was in charge for the palace's provisions for the month.
It's good. I think just that rotation piece is so interesting because I think what it allowed was it allowed people to still spend time with and raise a family, right? You would see there were different laws of you don't go to war. I don't even recall that, right? You just recently been married, or you recently had a child, or those kind of things, because it seemed like it was still very important. Maternity leave, paternity leave was a thing back then.
It
was
was
really important for them to really spend time with their families, and this general rotation allowed that to be a regular part of their life, where it's yes, they were destined to serve the king and serve the Lord, but it was never intended at least in the way that they organized it, to be this like year-round thing that you're away from your people and your family.
Everyone's breaking their neck, so we just have more people to break their neck all the day and all night. But it was, he said, for rest and relief too.
Yeah, so I don't know, I thought it was just really interesting that, again, it's 11 months off, 1 month on. And just to contrast that with kind of the lifestyle that we live now.
If only.
Yeah, you might get 1 month off, 11 months on,
If you get a month off.
Right. And so, yeah, it's very interesting to see that dynamic and that difference. And just really see that play out in, again, all the different, like, roles or assignments that are kind of were allowed there.
Yeah. What I think the other thing that stuck out to me here in verse 5 was, I don't know if I ever realized that Benaiah, that's my guy, right? The warrior, that he was the son of a priest. I was like, interesting. Like, we mentioned it a few times, like priests we know to like be down for the cause when it comes to like the sword and the spear. Like they get with it too. But just to know that like one of the best and mightiest warriors that David had was the son of a priest was interesting.
Yeah, I don't think that stuck out to me. Yeah, I thought it was interesting verses 23 and 24 kind of just call out the census again, right? So like David didn't count the men 20 or under. The Lord said he would make Israel's numbers as the stars of the sky. Joab, son of Zeruiah, began to count them, but he didn't complete it. And there was wrath against Israel because of the census, and the number was not entered in the historical record of King David. So I thought it's just a reference to that census. Again, Joab started, but we found, we said at the time he didn't finish counting the Levites or the Benjamites. But I did also think that last part of it, just that because of that, they didn't actually, because of like the consequences of it, they chose not to include that number in the historical record.
Right.
King David, like, yeah, I just thought was interesting specifically. But anything else here in 27 that jumped out to you?
Yeah, the very last thing is I love when they point out sometimes like David's family members, because in verse 32 it says Jonathan, David's uncle, was a counselor, being a man of understanding and a scribe. So here we do have another scribe here, but yeah, kind of just like makes me think like like his family, he came from like, it seems like a sound family at some point, like like just some of the people that they mentioned, like even just how he said like one of David's nephews killed one of the giants, right? And so we just see this activity of David's family like throughout, like even the sons of Zeruiah, Joab is like his nephew, right? Like his sister's son. And so like we see David's family like very much involved here, which was cool to see.
Yeah, I mean, I did think it was just interesting. Mine tells me that Jonathan was a counselor, a man of understanding. It's kind of the words that they use, but yeah, even going back to what we mentioned with Issachar, just like that seeming that wisdom or so it seemed that he had, and yeah, just to have that in David's like corner, right? That understanding and that counsel.
Yeah, like he has his uncle counseling him, he has his nephew protecting him. Like it's a whole dynamic happening.
Yeah, very interesting. Well, we get to 28, and again, it's very interesting. It feels like a longer version of something we just read, as David's kind of giving instructions to Solomon on what it is he's supposed to do to build the temple. A lot of it sounded actually repetitive to what we just read a couple chapters ago, but there's a little bit more depth to it, or detail, as David gives instructions to Solomon specifically. What do you think was interesting in 28 as he kind of tells everyone again why they're building this temple?
Yeah, I mean, to me, it literally just it gives Samuel to me and Moses, right? Like where it's once again like this charge, like we mentioned before, that like he first addresses the people of Israel, and he addresses his own son, and like it really like begins and ends with like, listen, follow the Lord, like, right? And like, so like even just the first words that he says to Solomon, it's like, no, in my version it says, know the God of your father and serve him with a whole heart and a willing mind, for the Lord searches all hearts and understands every plan and thought. And so it continues, and it's so rich here, but like but this whole like know the Lord, like know God, like it's not like know about, not just like, you know, be aware of him, but like David has formed this relationship with the Lord that it seems rare, you know, because there's very few people in this Bible up to this point who has shown that they've had an actual relationship with him. Like even when we were going through Genesis with like Abraham had a relationship, but it didn't seem like, you know, Jacob quite got that, right? That like even the way that he spoke about God didn't seem like this personal in-depth relationship. And so it's like, you know, we see some individuals have it, like the Moses and the Joshuas and the Samuels, and now David. And so I feel like that is like the desire that David has for his son.
Yeah.
Like let it be a heart thing, like a heart and a mind thing.
Yeah. I thought it was interesting that you stopped though before.
I know.
You know, if you seek him, he will be found by you. But if you abandon him, he will reject you forever.
Yeah.
Because I think like, you know, it's one of those things that we just, again, this is all written in hindsight, so it's fair for us to also refer, plus we've already read it, like to what Solomon ultimately does, but like he abandons God.
Yeah.
Right? Like going back to what we said the other day about the census, you know, I think David is clear to Solomon, like you have to stay faithful to him your whole life. Right? It's not just about being faithful to him most of your life, right? But it's like seek him the whole time, because as soon as you abandon him, he will reject you forever.
Yeah.
And I just, that word forever.
Like, yeah, that's harsh. Yeah.
Yeah, it just, I don't know, it just challenges me that like God will, and I mean he knows it from experience because he watched it happen with Saul, right? He saw what happened with Saul. And so like I know David knows that, and then you know we will see it eventually with Solomon as well, because God's gonna rip this kingdom from him because of the way he rejects him. And so yeah, I thought those words were very interesting. And I also think that like it's interesting that all of this is before all of Israel, right? Like this isn't a private conversation. Like verse 2 tells us that David rose to his feet and said, listen to me, my brothers and my people. Like this is something he is saying to all of Israel. He assembled all the leaders of Israel, right? And then is saying this to Solomon in front of everybody.
Right.
Which I believe, you know, I'm sure is for some extra accountability, but also just for some clarity for everyone involved.
Yeah.
What else do you see here in chapter 28?
Yeah, but then he goes on in like verse 11, and we see that he gives Solomon the plans now, right? Like he hands over these plans. I think it's really interesting, and I don't know how your version states it, but it's like it says in verse 12, and the plan of all that he had in mind for the courts of the house of the Lord, and blah blah blah. Like I thought it was interesting that like it was like all that David had in mind. Because I think we noticed before that, like, we didn't really see a, like, thus says the Lord, this is how you should build my temple, right? Just like he had said for the tabernacle. Now, when we actually see the temple built, there are some very similar things and some things that were exactly the same, like the length of the cherubim and how they were supposed to be and certain things here and there. But it didn't seem like some of these things came from, like, the word of the Lord. But it did seem like this is what David had in mind. That passes on.
Yeah, I think that is interesting, because I think like when I read it in Kings, I came with the impression that like this temple was more Solomon's vision.
That part, me too.
And his like dream in his design. But when you read it in Chronicles, it's more like, no, David designed the temple. Solomon just builds it. Like, he's just the one that ultimately collects the last little bit of cedar needed from that king. But most everything else he used to build, David even provided for him. Like, he didn't even have to collect a lot of that stuff.
Exactly.
And he ultimately built it according to his father's vision and dream for it.
Yep.
Which I think that's just it's an interesting, a different perspective. Like, in general, I feel like Chronicles gives David more credit for that temple than Kings does at all. And I thought that was very interesting to me.
Yeah, same.
Yeah, I mean, getting from the vision to the collection of stuff, the establishment of the rotation, like, it was just like, we don't get all of that at the end of David's life in Kings or in 2 Samuel, technically. Like, we get, as you said, a lot of the family drama, stuff that was happening with Absalom and all that stuff. We get his words to, like, some words to Solomon, but it's much more just that, like, show yourself a man, be a good, you know, follow the Lord. But we don't get any of this instruction that David leaves him for how to build it until we get to Chronicles.
Yeah. And I mean, I could be misspeaking too on, like, the instruction of the Lord, because in verse 19 he does say, all this he made clear to me in writing from the hand of the Lord, all the work to be done according to the plan. Like, maybe it was a conversation that we just weren't privy to.
Yeah, kind of some other thoughts on 28 at the end. You know, we kind of called it out, but David just continues to remind him not to be afraid or discouraged. Kind of around verse 20. And I mean, he specifically says it as like, don't worry, you'll be able to finish the work. You'll have rest, right? Which is something that is again specific to Solomon. That's specifically why he's able to do this, is because he will have rest, right? Like, he won't actually be at war constantly in the same way that David was. But I did think it was interesting that, again, he's also like, look, you'll have the skilled people. They'll be at your disposal to work. You have leaders. Like, you will have everything you need to be able to do this effectively. And so, you know, don't get discouraged when it gets hard. Don't get discouraged, you know, when you run up against something, because, like, God's going to provide what you need to complete this temple. So I just thought that encouragement was pretty interesting there.
Yeah, same. I love he says, be strong, courageous, and do it. Okay. Get it done. Yeah.
So we end on chapter 29, and there's kind of a similar, again, picture to Exodus. I don't know why I feel like so much of this is reminding me of Moses and Exodus, but you know, you get this again where they're trying to collect some of this, again, resources and things to build the temple, some additional things, and again, leaders bring all of what they need for gold and coins and tons of silver and all that kind of stuff, and similar, you know, probably more than they really needed, right? Kind of issue here, but it's kind of how it starts. Anything that jumps out to you in these first 9 or so verses of 29, which that was interesting.
Yeah, it says, I love that he's just like, I provided as far as I've been able to do, like the gold and all the things that he needs for the household. But verse 3 really sticks out to me, where he's just like, in addition to all of that I provided for the holy house, like, I have a treasure of my own gold and silver. And because of my devotion to the house of my God, I give it to the house of my God. And so, can you give me your numbers? Because mine are in talents here.
100 tons of gold, 250 tons of refined silver.
Yeah. Like, so he's given a lot of gold out of just his own. So it's like, it's one thing to ask other people. It's one thing to, like, collect this stuff. It's another thing to, like, just go to your own bank, right? Like, your own bank account and, like, your own treasury and, like, give this to the Lord. But then in this question that he poses at the end, I love the charge to the rest of the people. Like, okay, this is what I done did. Like, and I love it as a leader. he goes first, right? Like, this is what I've done. And then who then will offer willingly, consecrating himself today to the Lord? And then verse 6 is where we see the leaders who will come with these free will offerings. Leaders of the tribe, some of the commanding officers, some of like the military men, like they all come and they also give to the Lord. And I love that. Like you said, it was like I'm building a temple, not a palace for my son, not something more for myself for the end of my life. Like, we're going above and beyond, like you said, giving more than is necessary. Because I feel like when Solomon starts building this temple, I think he's just finding places to put gold, right? Like, they just look, we're just going, okay, let's put gold on the walls. All right, let's just put gold here. Like, let's just find places to put all this gold because we just have a lot. We have excess.
Yeah. And that's good. I think I love that, what you called out, right? That in that leadership, that he's not willing to ask them for anything he's not willing to do himself, right? And he kind of leads by example. And it's interesting because my pastor used to do that when we would do giving campaigns. Like, he would, if he were to ask the members for $1,000 in a year, let's just say, like, he would always do like 3 times that, whatever it was. Because he's like, yeah, I'm not gonna ask you guys to do something I'm not willing to do, and like go above and beyond. And so you kind of see David do something similar as well. So I do think it was interesting, just particularly as a leader, like something that I'm pretty like careful about, but like I think it was interesting that he actually does tell them what he's giving. Because I don't, for me, that's private information. Like, I just feel like I might say like, yeah, I'm giving, but like may not, be clear. But like, he goes specific, like, this is exactly what I'm doing. So like, what are you gonna do? And so I don't know, not to say that's gonna lead me to tell people what I give, but just I thought it was just an interesting like anecdote that as you said, like, he gave specific numbers, but it leads to the generosity to people, and it works, and they respond. But again, I love that. It goes back to even that idea of, I'm not going to offer that which costs me nothing. Like, I'm not going to build this temple and it not cost me something too, specifically, kind of idea. But starting at verse 10, we have another prayer from David. And this is before everybody, again, the assembly. So like, he's still kind of in front of them. Yeah, what do you think was interesting about his prayer?
Just in this whole thing, it's just heart posture that just sticks out to me. Like, as he prays, like, it's very different than like some of the prayers that we hear today, right? Like, when our preachers or teachers and even ourselves, how we get up and pray before the Lord, like, and what we say to him. It just seems so different that like it's blessings, Lord. It's blessings. And then, sometimes we do that, but then when we get to the media, it's like the asking of stuff, right? But like when he gets to him, it's just straight humility. But in verse 14, but who am I and what is my people? That we be able to even just offer this willingly. Like, who are we to even be able to offer you something? Yeah. Not receive, but offer you. But I love what he says, for all things come from you, and of your own we have given you. And I think I liked in my real version. Can you read your version? Because I like that one better, that part where it's kind of like...
It's verse 16?
Or 14, into 14.
Oh, okay, sorry. For everything comes from you, and we have given you only what comes from your own hand.
Exactly. And I love that.
Yeah.
Like, this acknowledging, like, yeah, we gave you all of this stuff for your temple, but it was already yours anyways.
Yeah. Verse 16 says something similar. It says, Lord our God, all this wealth that we've provided for building you a house for your holy name comes from your hand. Everything belongs to you. Yeah, I love it. Again, there's still emphasis on his heart. You test my heart. Or I know that you test the heart, that you are pleased with what is right. I willingly give these things with an upright heart. And, this is I think points out just the heart posture of generosity that God desires of us, right? We know this later in scripture where it tells us God loves a cheerful giver. But it says in verse 17 that he was willingly given these things. And then later in that same verse, it says that, I've seen your people who are present have given joyfully and willingly to you. So like there's just this, I appreciate the call out that like people weren't, had to like twist people's legs to give, you know what I'm saying, and drag them along or require them or make it mandatory. But the people gave willingly and joyfully. And it's from that God evaluates. He is evaluating the heart posture in our generosity much more than even the amount or the gift. And I think that's something that's good to point out.
It is. And I was even just thinking here that like it kind of grieves me because I'm looking at him in verse 19 saying, grant to Solomon my son a whole heart that he might keep your commandments, your testimonies, your statutes. And so I think to me, now that we have read through again Solomon's life, right, and what he ultimately ends up doing, it does kind of just grieve me that like, and just put some perspective that like, our parents can pray for us. They can pray long and hard for us, right, all their lives. But like, we still have the choice in our actions, right? Like in God, we see him shaping and molding in people's hearts and hardening and softening hearts, but it really is never to sway them to love him wholeheartedly or to like make them obey him, And so I think even here where it shows me it's like he's praying. God can, but like he really wants genuine true love from us. And it's not forced. It's not manipulated. It's not coerced. Like Solomon at this point when he takes reign has a choice to remember and obey the statutes like he's been taught. Or to abandon them. And I think that's just for us a reminder. I think we mentioned this in church that like living for God is a daily thing. It's like a daily decision to get up every single day and choose, yes, Lord, I'll obey. Or yes, Lord, I'll do this for you. Or, that's what like the New Testament scriptures say, we're going to die to ourselves daily. Like what I want to do, I'm going to put to the side. I'm going to choose what God wants daily. And so just seeing this, Solomon, the wisest man, and the prayers of his father, for him, like it just puts in perspective, like to me, like I have far less wisdom than Solomon, right? And I might have parents praying for me, but at the end of the day, like I can still fall short.
Yeah, for sure.
And still do good things though. Could still build a big temple and still have all this riches and glories because he does some of the stuff that
for the most part, Solomon's a good king.
For the most part, he does all these great things, right?
Yeah, it's good. Okay. Well, I'll say one thing that jumped out to me is kind of after this prayer, we essentially worship God and kind of get in worship, and then you have a party. Like verse 22, they ate and drank with great joy in the Lord's presence that day, and like, that sounds like a party to me.
It sounds like a party.
And I'll be real. Like I don't always feel like God is fun. I don't know if God is fun. I know He's a lot of things. Fun is not a word. It's not an attribute of God I've ever heard of. He's holy and righteous and mighty and kind and generous. Fun is not a word I associate with the Lord. So I like to call out the times when he does have fun.
Yeah.
So it's there.
Yeah, it's there. Because I think you mentioned it before when we started talking about like all these festivals, like the 3 main festivals and stuff that we want them to have, and how always included eating and drinking and gathering. Like, he's ordained three whole parties every year.
3 every year. This one was spontaneous.
This was a
surprise party.
Bonus.
On the fly. So, hey, I'm just saying. You can party for the Lord. With the Lord, specifically. It was in his presence. So,
it was in his presence, so get it together.
Yeah, so I'm saying, don't do nothing at that party you couldn't do in front of the Lord, is all I'm saying. But, yeah, then there's kind of the second this is interesting thing where it says it's for the second time they anointed Solomon king, which I don't know why, but I just thought it was interesting. And then they summarized David's life. Anything in particular kind of through the end of this chapter that jumped out to you?
This last two sentences, well, probably just the 29. I do think it's like interesting that like this author pulls from like where his sources were. It's kind of like, to me, like, you know, you're citing your sources at the end. This is like, well, you know, don't believe me. Just go ahead and look in the Chronicles of Samuel, the seer, and the Chronicles of Nathan, the prophet, and the Chronicles of Gad, the seer, with these accounts. And so it just seems like, yeah, a lot of probably his resources were pulled from, and, you know, facts and stuff was pulled from here, which, of course, these things we don't have, especially titled in this way. And we do have Samuel, right? The first and second Samuel. So we have that one. But like some of these we don't have in the same way, but we do have like the duplicates of the stories in other forms. So
yeah, I think I read that part and I wonder, because I mean I don't know who wrote Kings, I don't know who wrote Second Samuel.
Yeah,
right. I know Nathan was around for that, for Second Samuel,
right.
And so part of me wondered, like, are they also contributors to some of those books that we have, or is this a whole separate book? I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
But it made me think that as I read it, like, oh, well, they were around during Second Samuel and some of the other stuff. Probably not Kings, because Kings kind of travels through a lot of time. And by the time we get to, you know, the exile, these prophets aren't around. So, but maybe Second Samuel, because we know Samuel dies in First Samuel. So,
right.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Somebody had to write Second Samuel. Maybe that was Nathan or something, but yeah, very, very interesting. And it's not over. We still have Second Chronicles, which will continue in the line of Judah. But I don't know, very interesting to see this book written again in hindsight, after the fact, for this author to put this together and compile it for the purpose of encouraging the people and giving them hope. But yeah, just also just see it from that perspective as a, you know, real past tense type of thing. But anything else? First Chronicles, you want to? No?
Nope.
All right. Well, that is another book down. First Chronicles is complete. Yay. So I will pick up on Second Chronicles on Monday. I'm excited. I believe it's you and Mia next week holding it down for us. So I won't be with you guys again. Another week off for me. But again, appreciate you guys joining us this week, and again, just really through this entire study. But I pray that you've been able to keep up with the reading. It's been helpful, and that this podcast has really just been a support and a resource for you along the way as we just share our own insights and observations and thoughts. And if you have your own, please share them with us. We'd love to hear from you in our app, the chat in our app. We leave comments places on YouTube or Facebook, kind of whatever is most convenient for you. We'd love to hear from you. But yeah, appreciate you guys joining us this week. I look forward to seeing you guys on Monday. Until then, take care.
Thank you for joining us for the VIBEZ Daily Podcast. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform, or download our favorite, the VIBEZ Church app. Visit vibes.church/devoted for additional episodes, notes, details, and the latest merch. Join us next time as we continue our journey through the Bible. Take good care.